Hello and welcome to another episode of Infrastructure Matters. I'm joined as always by my co-hosts Camberley Bates and Krista Macomber. And Camberley, you finally got the memo about the vest for today. Come on,
Enjoy
show
it
them.
while you can, because I only show up in cheerleader outfits once a month or something like that. So there we go.
Come on, show the listeners that you've got the logo close to your heart.
On the right side. Okay. I'm just making sure it's on the right side. All right, let's go.
Let's go. Enough of the goofing around and picking on Camberley. Let's get into it. We've got a packed show this week. I've been going and doing my mainframe nerd and geekiness and hanging out with that community, so we'll cover that. We've got NetApp, Skylinks, Nutanix. We've got some earnings perspective. Now we've gone through a bunch of the cycles. So do you want me to go first, or what do you want to do? Do you want to go to you, Camberley, or how do you want to play it?
Go geek out. Let's talk mainframe.
Yeah, so I got to service my passion for all things Big Blue and sort of Big Iron this week. So basically, twice a year there's a big mainframe conference called Share. They run it in different locations. We had the spring one this past week. A couple of thousand mainframe practitioners and all of the vendors. So a couple of big announcements that stood out for me, and I've got coverage notes in the works. IBM announced the ZOS container platform, which I think is fascinating. Not many people would put. So if you think of Red Hat and OpenShift container platform on top of it, this is the same structure. So you've got the ZOS operating system and then open container platform sitting on top of it. So I think the key takeaway for me is the core mainframe ZOS development team, and I met with the director who runs that development team. 4-year effort, hundreds of packages from the open source community ported, upstreaming those and being a good citizen to the community. Really shows that the mainframe operating system, which I think many people would think, hey, are they really putting any R&D into that, or is it just sort of a cash cow for IBM? Absolutely not. Hard engineering work, thousands of man hours, and I've got that question to find into the team to sort of get the full debrief. But they ran me through that on Wednesday. Really fantastic piece of engineering. And then the other piece was an announcement from Broadcom around their Watchtower capability. This is bringing open telemetry to the mainframe. So there's been a lot of work within the open source community attached to the mainframe and the Open Mainframe project about bringing OTel from an observability perspective and really being able to connect that mainframe into a Splunk, into a Datadog, a Dynatrace, a Logic Monitor, whoever it is from an overall observability platform, but being able to plug that mainframe in. So what Broadcom's done is put this horizontal layer in place that enables all their tools and anybody's tools with an open API to connect into this Watchtower platform that really provides a single sort of management interface. And then you can connect that up into a OTel compliant observability platform. So again, fantastic. I think the key takeaway for me was we hear a lot about Broadcom buying software companies and not investing in the software. This is counter-narrative to that for me. There's hard R&D and investment by Greg Lockcomb and his team into developing this functionality, and they're not making it chargeable. Anybody who's got the supporting products gets this set of features as part of their entitlement. So lots of counter-narrative to what we hear around the Broadcom VMware kind of not investing in software and then charging more for it. This kind of goes against that whole message for me. So I think, obviously good value add for the mainframe team, but also kind of directionally gives you some perspective on where Hock and the sort of wider leadership team heads at when they think about long-term strategy for a software business that Broadcom acquires. We're 5 years into now, CA being part of Broadcom. So, they're continuing to invest and continuing to sort of bring value to their clients. So good takeaways for me, I think. And lots of
Question. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Question on share. How big it is, the conferences?
So you've probably got, I would say, 50 exhibitors.
Okay.
And a couple of thousand attendees. And these are all mainframe practitioners from, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Barclays, all of these types of accounts.
And has that changed in size at all over the last, I know COVID, everybody disappeared, but
So they're backed. So I did an interview with the share president, Scott Fagan, and asked him that exact question. They are back to pre-2020 levels. So they're back to where they were in 2019.
I'm just wondering if anything is picking up at all as we get to, the balancing of. I mean, it's rare to have new implementations of mainframe. It's mostly a turn of the crank to go to the next mainframe. But I would think that this podcast would influence purchases.
I would think so. I mean, the other big thing that
Talk about it so much.
Well, yeah, you would think so. I mean, the other big news was obviously we did some research for IBM, Broadcom, and 21CS that launched with some of the highlights in an IBM press release. They announced a skills council this week to focus on mainframe skills. Really good community effort to bring together a number of the mainframe vendors to collaborate around skills. Our research was featured in that press release. You should see the final report from us in a couple of weeks' time.
So I was actually had a laugh because Randy was cleaning out part of his office and he had a assembler book, and so I was offering it to Jeff Fellows, who's on John Fellows, who's on our lab team. He's like, "Here, do you want the assembler book? People still need to know how to code assembler."
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole space there's a lot more. I've been going to share now for far too many years, and the demographic has changed. There is a lot of fresh new faces, a lot of college kids. I was talking with one of the DevOps leaders from BMC, and it makes no sense to me why you would go and get a job as a Java developer in a games company and earn this amount of money, or go and be a COBOL developer for a big bank and earn 3x the amount of money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a very strong position, and I've got a good friend of ours that is here in Colorado. That's what he does. He does mainframe, and it's just one. He's a consultant, and that's all he does, and he just cranks it out. So anyway, really cool. Love it.
So lots of geekiness, some coverage from me coming out that's already in the works. So let's go. Who's picking up NetApp from you two? Is that you, Camberley?
No, it's actually Krista, because it's a huge cybersecurity rollout that they had. So she was covering it.
They did, and this one was fun to cover. We've been tracking NetApp's kind of cybersecurity strategy fairly closely, especially over the past year or so. Last year, they actually launched a data services division that is really in large part helping to drive this charge when we think about, for example, software capabilities to control immutability or to help to drive recovery. And so there was a number of announcements. We'll actually link to the research note that we did that has all of them, but there's a couple that I did want to walk through. And the first is, so NetApp has a feature called Autonomous Ransomware Protection, ARP. And what this is it's sort of machine learning, kind of AI driven, really kind of attack detection capability. And one thing that's interesting for NetApp is that they've actually embedded that directly into their operating system ONTAP. So when we think about, the production storage, that they're shipping, it's all being shipped with this capability. And so they're saying that plus some of their new licensing has really helped to drive adoption. And so they've updated the capability, and what they've done is they've actually added new potential, sort of threat vectors to look at, and new logic detection as well. So a couple of things that they talked about with us were the ability to detect when headers or specific content has been manipulated, or if metadata has been manipulated, as well as the ability to detect partial encryption of files. And to me, that's very important because we are seeing that for ransomware attacks, they certainly are becoming more sophisticated. It's no longer kind of just this blunt, we're going to go ahead and kind of encrypt this entire storage volume. They're kind of having some of these drips and drabs, for example, like the partial file encryption. They talk about having more than 99% both precision and recall is the language that they use. So that is the ability to accurately detect an attack, and also the ability to kind of detect all the attacks that are occurring. So obviously that's important, especially helping to avoid kind of alert fatigue and potential false positives. So that was kind of one thing from the announcement that I wanted to touch on. And then another one that I wanted to touch on that's actually in public preview is they call it their ransomware recovery capability through BlueXP, which is their cloud management portal. And so what this is going to do is it's going to be able to look at the data stores and uncover if workloads are potentially at risk. And from there, it can kind of automatically recommend policies, automatically apply policies, and really kind of the ability to look at that environment and kind of, provide that guidance and some automated action as well. And I think that's important because it's more and more important to make sure that there are no blind spots in the environment and to make sure that everything is protected, especially as attackers are continuing to innovate with all of these different, approaches for attacks. And so that's a very difficult job for IT, obviously, to be able to keep up with. So again, the ability to kind of have that automated identification and applying policies, I think, is really important. So again, we'll link to the full research note, but those were a couple of things to me that were more headlining.
Yeah, so I know you cover this space more than I do. I suppose the takeaway for me is NetApp unique in how they're investing in this type of deep security stuff. From I kind of tag NetApp as a storage vendor. Are you seeing them kind of uniquely innovating in the space versus other storage vendors? Or am I thinking about that the right way?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it is pretty unique that we look at them primarily as that kind of production or primary storage vendor. And so I think the fact that they're trying to really bake that in as much as possible is important. When we get to recovery, they are going to play a very specific role there because it is going to be primarily based on snapshots that sit on the storage array as opposed to your data backups that are going to sit on, your production storage infrastructure. So that is kind of a delineation, and they do have a specific role to play here. But yes, I mean, I would see it as a pretty unique approach from that perspective.
One of the areas that I would point out here, and correct me if I'm representing this, but the uniqueness on this piece on the primary storage about where they're detecting 99% of whatever's going on is not just the alerting, it's the fact that once they detect, they snapshot.
Yes.
And that instant path, that instantaneous kind of stuff, they're not asking. So what we're doing is you're putting in the machine here to do the action, to take the action to have to happen. So I've detected something. I know I'm right. I know the machine we've got confidence that it's right. I've snapshotted it. I've got a point in time that I can recover. And that's what makes this very, very different and unique. So, and this is what we've been talking about as well, is that we have to move into primary storage for protection. It can't just be our data protection devices that are doing this. And that's and I will expect others to follow suit here.
Absolutely.
And, and you see that coming out of, IBM has been a leader with their flash core modules and doing their pieces of it that they're doing. So this is all going to, that will all follow suit here. It's just that how fast can we get there and how well is it done and how good is the training that's done in there. And we did challenge that number quite a bit to them about how they could actually call that number, because it's unbelievable when you say that 99%. And it appears that it is truly that number. So versus Hyperbowl or something like that.
Oh, good to see. Good to see. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting trend, trying to bake that security actually into the storage operating system. I wasn't aware of that, but that to me sounds directionally interesting, and I agree. If that takes hold, you're going to see that ripple across the other vendors. So next up on our list is Skynix. Am I saying that right?
No, you're not. It's SK Hynix.
Some CMO is sort of turning in their grave as I butcher the name, so
Right.
maybe correct me.
Is a very large memory company, and they do primarily memory out of Korea. So,
Okay.
and I've started watching them a little bit more. Actually, I started more, because I'm on the data side. Why did I start watching them? Is because the memory side is becoming so important, and memory is just now just another layer in the triangle of the data side of the house, and kind of the speed to the cold. They're very, very fast. The fastest, of course, is going to be your memory, direct access memories, and they do high bandwidth memory, they do regular memory, they do the other kind of memory, etc. And what they announced this week was another $1 billion in chip packaging, and it's like, who cares about that, really? And part of the caring about this is because they have this last quarter, their DDR5 4 times the amount of shipments there. Their high bandwidth memory 3 was 5 times the shipments there. Why? It's called AI again. Okay, so talking about the servers are going to eat up the memory, and the chip packaging is going to address more dense memory. In terms of how we package. I mean, the problem is that it's getting so small now. You've got all kinds of problems with this noise going back and forth, et cetera, in it. So the chip packaging becomes very, very, very critical to what we're going to be delivering over in the future years. So they're working closely. They're heavy, a lot of supply to NVIDIA. They're also a big supplier into phones as well. But I'm more interested in what's going on in the enterprise. The other thing that I'll say about SK Hynix, and the reason why I really started tracking them, is because Intel at one point in time had solid state drives. And that spun off when Gelsinger came on, and that became a company called Solidigm. And that Solidigm is owned by SK Hynix. And so that's where the connection is. So if you look at their CEO, they've got a co-CEO. One was the former Intel person. The other one is from SK Hynix. It's about a $9 billion spinoff that they went over there. But that's kind of where I started tracking them and saying, okay, so this is really interesting. We're going to be watching both of these companies, as we go forward, because we will see the uptick. We are seeing already the uptick on the memory, but we will also see the uptick on the data piece.
Well, that gives us a segue into the next piece that we wanted to cover. We're sort of post-earnings sort of palooza now. Most of the companies have kind of announced that we track in this space. You were talking there about sort of the connection to AI. I think the key takeaway from me, I covered HPE earnings, AI shipments. Also spent some time with Kirk Skaugen from Lenovo, on the day after earnings. I mean, obviously anything with a GPU in it from NVIDIA is hotcakes now and is selling out, and there's kind of a huge inventory backlog of any server that's good for AI. But I mean, going the next level down, are you seeing that from a memory perspective as well, Camberley? I know you've got some perspective there.
Yes, we've seen the memory kick up. I think you said it. You said it last week. And I've used the phrase, even though it's kind of like, I'm not sure I want to say that. The canary in the mine.
Canary in the coal mine. Yeah.
The coal mine is like, oh, I'm not sure I want to talk about this dying situation. But the canary in the coal mine basically you were saying, with all those NVIDIA GPUs going out there, they got to reside someplace. They're going to reside in the servers. So we saw the servers just, go up. And even my husband said, who in the heck is Supermicro? Why is their stock taking off? And it's like, okay, let me explain what's going on. It's because their stock took off just like Dell's stock has taken off, because they're shipping, 40% or some number like that is increased to the amount of AI servers that they're shipping, et cetera. So that's the first. Then the other piece of this is high bandwidth memory. I'm going to be at the end of March, I'll be at the CXL conference, MemCon. talking about CXL. CXL is how we're using PCIe to pool memory and to better utilize the memory that's in the server. So we're just starting to ship some of that technology. It's not real yet, but it is going to be addressing another big piece of the problems that we have with these architectures that are going in and not enough memory. And then the other piece that we're going to see is the data side of the house. So that's going to happen. We're starting to see it already. Had a really interesting briefing with DDN this last week about where they're at. And they're a unique company in the market. They've been in high performance computing forever. Been one of the premier folks over there. They're shipping like crazy. And they had what they'd shipped this last quarter for the AI space was more than they shipped all last year. And all of that, most of that is going into very large GPU farm companies. They're not going into the enterprise right now. It's going into the big GPU farm that are going up that are cloud offerings.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this is we're almost in the first innings of a new super cycle. You know, we had networking kind of and connectivity was the first wave of the internet cycle. Then all the sort of browser wars and all the other things kind of happened after it. We're starting to see that infrastructure get deployed for AI. You know, we had mobile run and all the infrastructure roll out for all the mobile apps and all the rest of it sort of 2007 onwards. For me, this is just the next hyper cycle starting, and we're starting to see that come through at all the layers in the stack. Obviously, NVIDIA's on a great run with where they're at, but that's now starting to come through to all the adjacencies. We're seeing it in custom silicon, we're seeing it in memory, we're seeing it in software. You know, all these adjacent areas around the GPU are all just in the early cycle of that the first innings of the hyper cycle for me. So, you know, it's fascinating, and that's now starting to reflect in earnings, which is where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah. The other place it's going to hit is that, and this came up with some of the conversations I had with some end user spaces where they've shipped a whole bunch of stuff and it hasn't been a whole bunch of items and it hasn't been deployed yet. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's shelfware, but it's sitting there because they're not sure what to do or how to do. And so we're seeing consultants come in to help this. So that where we see this lifting the boat, another boat, is in the consulting side of the house. So we're going to see, folks like Wipro, Accenture, probably Kyndryl. Those folks are going to be coming in to help these companies implement the systems. One of the questions said, really, is it not just the hype? Isn't this just a hype? And I said, no. And the reason being is because other companies have figured out how to use this. They are implementing it in their operational space. They are getting their payback on this already. They are going to be able to relook at their operational systems and reduce that cost. They're going to have to figure it out as well. And in order to do that, if they don't have the skills inside, they're going to be hiring them out. So we have the consulting services that are going to kind of rise up as well.
It's across the whole stack. It's final thing we've got here on the docket is Nutanix and their D2IQ announcement this week.
Yeah. So Nutanix, my peer Paul, he covers this space on terms of the Kubernetes. D2IQ, Day2IQ used to be Mesosphere. They were picked up by Nutanix to be a Kubernetes platform with them.
Okay.
So it's going to be sitting on AHV and offering it. What's going to be interesting about this is they've got all kinds of partnerships with OpenShift and all the other guys that are out there. And now they're bringing their own Kubernetes distribution in, or just another distribution. So we'll see how that's going to balance out with their relationships there. There may be a little bit of tension, possibly. We'll figure that out when we get to KubeCon and talk to the folks about where this is all going and what's happening.
It's only a couple of weeks away. I'm assuming we've got a briefing with those guys scheduled for while we're out there.
I believe we do.
So we'll report back.
I'm working on it.
I know we're recording an episode of this in person. We'll bring in Paul onto the show where we record.
Yep.
So I think, unless there's any other thematic topics, are we done for today?
I think we are.
I think we are. So you've been listening to the Infrastructure Matters podcast. This is episode 34. We've been doing this a while now. So please click and subscribe and do all those things to promote the show and make sure that other people get to watch and listen. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching and listening.